Hey guys, I'm Naya and welcome back to the channel. So for today's video, maybe the next one as well, no idea, but the setup is going to be different. And for those of you that have been since the very beginning, you know, it's nothing new, it's just a throwback to me recording in my kitchen. So for this video, I'm back over here and we're actually redoing and renovating our bedroom, aka my filming space. So we're doing a lot of work over there and I actually wanted to set up over there, but it would be almost impossible. So that pretty much explains my entire setup. So today we're going to be talking specifically about cards to counter Ishizu Tearlaments. We are very quickly approaching the Ishizu Tearlaments Magnificent Maven format. And all of us are probably a little bit scared because the Ishizu support is just busted and it is going to turn Tearlament into an even tougher contenders. So before getting into it, I just want to shout out every single one of my patrons. A Patreon exclusive video is dropping in a couple of days, so keep an eye out for that. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get started. The Ishizu support, as the entire player base sort of nicknamed it, is basically cards from Magnificent Mavens that are going to boost the Tearlament strategy significantly because they have abilities of milling cards to the graveyard. They have special summoning requirements of sending the other ones to the graveyard, so they trigger, on top of a couple of them effectively disrupting the graveyard as a quick effect. So it is going to be busted against Tearlaments and in Tearlaments as well. So you know that the mirror match is just going to be a pain probably, although it is pretty interesting. So those cards are insane. But our counters, thankfully, we have a couple at our disposal, and with Darkwing Blast, we even got a couple more. So as the first card on this list, I actually just have an older counter, which is obviously Dimension Shifter. A lot of decks right now can afford to play it. It's not just Flunder, which used to play it a lot. We have Exosister, we have Sprite, we have Crystal Beast even. So a lot of decks can run this card, and Tearlament is very, very, very oppressive. So it's just nice to have a counter to them that's almost as strong as the deck itself in shutting them off, if you know what I mean. So Dimension Shifter being able to prevent cards from hitting the graveyard, which Tearlament cards benefit from, is obviously an insane addition to a couple decks. And that's why it's the first card on this list. The next one is Bistio stuff. Obviously with Darkwing Blast, like I said, we got a couple cards and among them is the Bistio engine. It's effectively just DD Crows that can be a quick effect if your opponent controls a monster. And not only that, they don't discard themselves to the graveyard like DD Crow would, but they act as a body as well because it's just the way that their special summoning works. So you special summon them by banishing a light or dark monster. So you're taking away a resource from them and getting a resource yourself because their main one actually searches any dragon in the end phase, so it's very usable in a very dragon specific and oriented strategy like Dragon Link, but can also search other Bistio cards which work as follow-up disruptions. So amazing cards to pick up to counter the upcoming Tearlament. The next one again is going to be from Darkwing Blast, and it's the Shatrila Fenrir. It is one of the best cards from the Darkwing Blast set. It's basically just a special summon, similarly to something like Pankratops, but you are able to banish your opponent's cards face down. It's face down. And not just destroy them as Pankratops would. Also, it stays on the field as a body, so there's that. It can also beat over Kitkalos, since we're talking about it staying on the field. And the fact that its effect actually works in tandem with them declaring an attack, because you can, on your attack declaration, banish your opponent's card face down. So it's bigger than Kitkalos, which is cool. And also the banishing obviously doesn't trigger Tearlaments, which we also want. And it's very expensive for an ultra rare, but it is worth investing into. It's not just great against Tearlament, but against a bunch of different strategies, since it is a card that's good going first, good going second. And people really, it puts them on guard, like they need to play around it. You need to declare your monster effects for you to even be able to play. So it's just kind of awkward. It becomes weird. So all in all, this card just seems amazing. Now the next small engine was actually taken from the OCG. I actually saw it on one of the Road to the King deck lists, and the note made was the fact that people are running Artifact Titan Sanctum because it's better than D-Barrier, since with the Ishizu cards your opponent is able to Xyz summon because all of them are level 4, and you have very strong rank 4 Xyz monsters at your disposal in the Tearlament deck. You've had them from before, but now they're even more easily accessible. They're playing Zeus as well, so it's just a cool tech. If you're thinking about the fact that D-Barrier might be a slightly less stronger card just because they're able to Xyz summon as well. So that was a really cool note on their part, and I just wanted to shout them out about this. Now, the next thing is going to be super polymerization. I'm not claiming it's the best card to use against them, because I do think that if you're running super poly, you probably should be running it in a strategy where it really benefits you as well, just because you need to dedicate all of your tech card slots, so flex spots, and also side deck space for very, very impactful cards. And when it comes to super polymerization, unless you're going into it very easily with your cards, it doesn't seem worth it, because they might not be ending on a super polyable board with every single board. Now, the thing is that before it was a bit easier, but right now when you have Rulkalos at your disposal, you probably want to go into it just because you want to be protected from Nibiru, but then you need to give up Dweller if you don't want to end on a board that can be beaten by super poly. Like if you want to make Dweller, because it's an insanely strong card to end on, you are going to have 2 waters on the field, so you are risking it. But then again, you might be ending on a very strong board if they don't have super poly. So it's kind of weird. You can decide for yourself. I still wanted to mention it as an option. Now, the next 2 cards are going to be Lava Golem and Sphere Mode. We have known from before that they are very, very, very strong, simply because they do not trigger Tearlament cards. They are not summoned by a card effect, it's just their way of being summoned. So it doesn't trigger the Tearlament cards, which is obviously amazing. And also, people are obviously going to be ending up on a 2 monster or 3 monster or even more monsters on the board, just because it's the kind of combo people usually go for. It is a combo deck. It is very, very monster heavy. And also, the next great thing about it is that when you're up against Tearlament, you also need to be aware of their back row. But with something like a Lava Golem, you effectively turn it off, because for their Tearlament trap cards to be able to be activated, they need to control a Tearlament's monster in the first place. So if you're thinking about that as well, you are effectively just wiping their entire field, not just one part of it. So both of them are insane. I do think Sphere Mode might be a tiny bit more situational, because oftentimes people will end on a 2 monster board. It might still be on a 3. They are using Baron de Fleur as well, because through Diviner of the Herald, you're able to go into it. So they might try to end up on more monsters, because in the format right now and before this one, right now not so much, but before this one, you don't end on Omni Negates. So Baron is really, really, really nice in that regard. And right now people are going into Baron. So again, it's just more monsters on the field and more options for you to just effectively use Lava Golem and Sphere Mode. So there's that. And we also mentioned how there's cards that don't really answer the entire board, and I did want to mention in that regard sort of Dark Ruler and Droplet. I still think it's just very, very solid cards going second into any kind of combo board, but with Tearlament it's weirder, because right now you just need to be afraid of any play they can make during your turn, because they have Hofinas, they have the trap cards, they have the Ishizu cards, and it's kind of insane. And sometimes just answering a board with something like Dark Ruler, it just doesn't seem to be enough, you know, but they are still ending, like I said, on Baron, multiple other things. So I would say just against Tearlament overall, you probably need to side a lot of very impactful cards. So if you happen to draw combinations of them, or at least one of them, and a good enough hand, you still might be able to actually break their board. So I still wanted to throw these 2 out there as an option. Now the next one is going to be Abyss Dweller. If your deck can make it, you should probably start making it, probably blindly in your end board, because Tearlament is going to be, Ishizu Tearlament is going to be everywhere. It's just a card that shuts off the graveyard. It's very, very, very strong and easy to summon. But the only thing to keep in mind about Dweller is the fact that more than likely you're going to have to use it on your first turn, so on turn 0 essentially, because your opponent might start doing their effects, because they like to play on turn 0. So with that, you're wasting one of the Dweller effects, because usually you would have them under Dweller for 2 turns, but right now you're only able to do it for just one of their turns. So then you need to OTK on turn 3, or you need to set up the best board, so it gives you less time. So that's something to think about, but still it's just definitely a card that needs to be mentioned. Now the next 2, I touched upon D-Barrier, and I also wanted to touch upon Skullmeister. Now both of them to me feel like, yeah, of course, they're go-to options probably when you think about like how to counter Tearlament. Like, yeah, right, okay, Skullmeister is going to negate something in the graveyard, D-Barrier, insane. And D-Barrier is still like, it's so impactful. but I wanted to mention them in the sort of single category because they both have downsides. D-Barrier, like I said, is going to probably fall off in popularity a bit if we're going by the OCG because of the arguments I listed and mentioned before. But when it comes to Skullmeister, since it needs to be chained directly to the effect, it immediately makes it worse, just because if they are able to chain block, you are not going to be negating the thing you really want to negate, so it's sort of forcing you and making you neg with the card you didn't really want to use on a, I don't know, something you're going to end up using it on because you don't want them to have a bigger board. So Skullmeister does feel a little bit lackluster. I still wanted to mention it. And I also want to say I didn't forget about DD Crow. I just wanted to mention it as a better Skullmeister, much better Skullmeister, because you don't really care about where in the chain you want to be using the DD Crow, because you can target what you want to banish. But when it comes to DD Crow, Bestios just might be a tiny bit better because they are bodies on the field as well. Now the next couple of things, I'm just going to throw all of them out there. I just wanted to mention a couple cards which we like to discuss when it comes to Tearlaments because they're obvious go-to choices. We have Different Dimension Ground, but it is a trap card. It's inherently slower. Then it's Soul Drain, again a trap card, but it's very strong because it's continuous, obviously being able to just shut off the effects, which is nice. There's also Necrovalley, just preventing anything from leaving the graveyard, but it's a niche card that cannot be played in every single strategy. And then to round things off, we also have Defissure and Macrocosmos. It's only at 1, so it's not easily accessible, but I still wanted to mention both of them. And I do think that will pretty much be it. Actually, I forgot about one more. There's Silent Graveyard as well. It's just a quick play spell card which you're able to use on your turn as well, so similarly to something like Dweller. But the downside to it is that it's preventing you from utilizing your own graveyard at the same point, so that's worse, definitely. And there is also the Nekomane King. So I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I would just say Nekomane because it's easier in my language, but whatever it's called, actually, the main thing about it is, again, it's one of those effects where it's like, oh, obviously that's going to be insane against tier, but actually, because it's a mandatory effect, it's always going to be going on the chain first. So then they can chain their own tier limit effects, and then at the end of the day, yeah, you move to the end phase, but they still plus off of their cards because their effects resolved first. They summon something like a Kid Kalos. They're able to get their search on the summons. So again, yeah, it's end phase, but it's still not like it's completely over because the Nekomane King needed to be sent to the graveyard anyway. So it's not 100% guaranteed. And it's just at this point, not worth it in my opinion. But it is an option. So with that, I do think I said everything I wanted to say. Now, the very last thing, I do think I need to say that you have stuff like Evenly, which is insane right now. And overall, there's cards that like, you know, force a negate, you know, because at the end of the day, they are either breaking a board or forcing a negate if you're going up against a deck that actually puts up negates, which Tearlaments didn't do before. But right now we're trying to get to Crime as well. And there's also Baron de Fleur. So they are starting to put up Omni Negates at this point in time. So a card like this, I wanted to mention it, but you need to take into account that they are putting up negates on the field right now. It might not even go through. If you still want to play it to be able to force it, it's an option, but it doesn't feel like such a blowout card as it feels right now. So it's like an extra mention on this list, I guess. And with that, I think I'm done. I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to mention. There might be more things, like there's Earth Shattering Event. I just remembered it. Like again, it's an interesting option. There might be more, but anything that I haven't mentioned, please mention in the comments down below. There's probably a bunch of things, but at the end of the day, you know, we all just want to learn from each other. So I'm very much grateful whenever you guys comment on my videos, your own input and ideas and things. And just, it's really nice. And I like interacting with you guys. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you like this video, please like it, sub to the channel and all of that. Check out all of the social media and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.